Hi, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Willie Clancy Summer School, which happens every July in Milltown Malbay in County Clare, and it's right out on the coast near the town of Spanish Point. And as kids, we started going to the summer school probably at the age of 12 and went for many, many years. Initially to classes and then to the wildness of the sessions, and we'll get to that in a moment. So it's a summer school that celebrates the life of an uilleann piper, which is the elbow pipes associated with Irish music. A guy called Willie Clancy, who was born near the town of Milltown Malbay back in 1918, and he was a fabulous piper. As many uilleann pipers tend to be really highly technical, and it's an unusual instrument like that it tends to bring a lot of very brilliant musicians to the instrument.
It was probably based on the Scots pipes, or Irish war pipes, for sure. The Scots and the Irish, they both claimed the war pipes, you know. But anyway, at a time when the pipers were forbidden to play in Ireland, they invented this soft-toned instrument, not as loud as the war pipes, you know.
At what time was that forbidden?
About what days, Murish?
Penal laws.
During the penal laws, anyway.
Although it was forbidden, people were playing it.
Oh, but that's the way, if you want to promote something forbidden, then it goes like a bang.
Correct. So, it came down from generation to generation.
That's right, yeah, it's generation to generation, yeah.
On what occasions do you play it usually?
Christenings, wakes, now and again if they had enough putty in them. Often great dances at wakes too. They'd have a quarter cask or a half barrel of porter taken in, and tea, snuff, tobacco.
Yes.
And they'd have great galley. They aren't dying half quick enough.
It wasn't a gay party then?
Yeah, it was a gay party, yeah.
Yes.
Often turned into a gay party, yeah.
Yes.
And sometimes the corpse sat up in the bed. They'd have to do other cards, you know, to join the celebration. Huh? Yeah, to bring around the big night.
Yes, to help them go up to heaven.
That's right, yeah. I think you don't believe half the lies I'm telling you.
He was a great musician, and so this summer school was set up to honour him. And initially, I guess it started and it's based mostly around the classes. And so at its height, it would have maybe 1,500 students would arrive in, many of them from abroad, adult learners, loads of kids. And there's 150 classes. And now they cover all of the instruments, so fiddle, accordion, flute, uilleann pipes, the special classes for making the reeds that go into the chanter on the uilleann pipes, concertina, harp, singing, and in more recent years, banjo. Banjo wasn't there when I was a kid. So we used to go to Willie Clancy, and we had a caravan, and we travelled down, parked the caravan out in Spanish Point in one of the campsites, and then we would go to the classes. And because there was no banjo classes, I went to fiddle classes. And I didn't really like the fiddle because it squeaked a lot and I wasn't very good at it. And the emotion of, I always figured, and I'm probably wrong, that the action of playing a picked instrument didn't help playing a bowed instrument. But I probably told myself that and then believed it, and then was never very good at bowing. But for want of something to do, I went to the fiddle classes, and it was a brilliant experience as a kid, 11, 12, 13. Going in at 10 o'clock in the morning, hanging out in the classrooms, and looking back now, meeting some absolutely incredible fiddle players. There was a great reverence for the older generation, so the likes of Bobby Casey, Junior Crehan, men that are passed on now, but were legends of Clare fiddling. And while you might have a teacher that would teach you all week, and they would get kind of gradually more hungover, in fairness, as the week went on. But then they would take a couple of hours during the week when they would bring in these fiddlers to play the real authentic Irish fiddling. And one of the guys that used to come around was a fiddle player called Tommy Peoples from Donegal. And I guess one of the things that was so nice about that time was being exposed to the really strong individual fiddling styles from various parts of the country. So Donegal fiddling style is very, very different to Clare style, or to a Galway style or a Sligo style. But Tommy Peoples always struck a very, very strong note with me. I loved his fiddle playing. I loved the Donegal style. It was quite attacking. A lot of double stopping, which is using two strings to create atmosphere, I guess. And he was an incredibly humble man. Amazing fiddler, absolutely revered in Ireland. Not the greatest teacher, because he wasn't a great communicator. He was actually a very, very shy man, but an incredible musician. During those classes, I made loads of friends, lifelong friends. Dara Bracken from the band Slide. I mean, we hung out as, 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, just having the crack in the classes, and then off to the beach afterwards in Ireland. And in July, it's still pretty cold, but then into the sessions. And so you'd kind of come home, have lunch, and you'd be raring to go, and then into town, into a pub, and just tunes and tunes and tunes. And the sessions would go for hours. And, the classes were one aspect of Willie Clancy Week, but probably a much bigger attraction were the sessions. So Milltown Malbay is a small town. It's just like basically one street. And I think at one stage there were maybe 20, 25 pubs in the town, and each of them had a different character. There was some when you were kids you wouldn't dare play in, because they were almost for the exclusive use of like really well-known musicians. And then others were known for total wildness and absolute madness. And there was certain musicians that would go and play in a certain number of pubs because they would be particularly drunken, particularly wild. And like literally the sessions would start at noon, and they could go to 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. And I had often played for that length of time. You might kind of go out for a bag of chips and come back, or a session would have a sort of an organic life as well, that it would start very fiery, and then after an hour or two, people get tired, different musicians come in and out. The character of the session changes depending on who's in that cohort in the middle that's driving the whole thing. Certain pubs would bring out trays of sandwiches, especially as you got in later into the night. There was some very famous pubs, the really old style Ireland, and I don't know if that they're still there, but the pub was right beside the house where the people lived. Cleary's Kitchen was one very famous one, and for the week that was in it, they would open up the kitchen, their own kitchen, as a sort of a spillover, and that was the most exclusive place to get to play a tune. Like, you could play in the bar, and in some small bars there might be 2 different sessions happening at the same time. But if you got into the kitchen, You were on hallowed ground. And some of the finest sessions with musicians who were like world-class famous musicians. You would suddenly hear that so-and-so was in town. They were in Lynch's, or they were in Friel's, or they were in Cleary's kitchen, and then the crowd would just race up there, and it was an amazing experience. And as we got older, I didn't do the classes in my kind of mid to late teens. Would just go for the crack and the stories and the sessions, and playing for hours and hours. And when you get kicked out of the pub eventually at 2:00 in the morning, you just set up on the street and you just play on the street. One of the favorite spots was the toilets at one of the campsites, because the sound in the toilet block was really good. And so you could have a session in there that would go until like morning. It was a crazy time. There was an awful lot of freedom, because we would get dropped into town at 3:00 in the afternoon. And when I was an older teenager, it was kind of like make your own way home. And it was about a half-hour walk, which was a long walk at 4:00 in the morning when you've had a few and you're seeing both sides of the road. And myself and Dara Bracken and Eamon DeBarra slept in a bunker in the golf course one night. We kind of made it as far as the golf course in the golf links in Silver Strand, and fell into a bunker and decided that we'd had enough walking for one night. We actually were trying to take a shortcut through the golf course, thinking that would get us to the campsite faster than the road. And then we largely got lost in the golf course and slept in the bunker instead. It's not the most comfortable sleeping place on earth. It was great fun. And I just, so many musicians of my generation went through the crucible of the Willie Clancy week. And I have just such great memories. Met so many amazing musicians. It was just... and the thousands and thousands of people that would cram into the town, the reverence that they had for the music. So you were in a pub, the music took precedence. All of the pubs would throw people out for talking too loud. If you tried to sing in a pub that was for music sessions, you'd be thrown out. And then there were special pubs that were just for singing sessions, and they would be packed, but total silence when people sang. So the reverence and the respect for the music was fantastic to witness. And just the excitement, the energy, the amount of people, you could go from pub to pub to pub, trying to find that session that had that little bit of magic that was just starting and get in there. You didn't want to come into a session that was going for a few hours, because there's every chance you'd get out, get a seat, and then the kind of that cohort that were running it would get tired, and the whole thing would just become jaded, and then you'd have to go on the search again, I have been pushed headfirst in through the window of those kitchen sessions so that you could get into the session, because you wouldn't be able to even make it into that room, because the pub would be thronged, and then the kitchen would be thronged, and then there's this drive-in session. It's in the corner, and you'd stick your head in the window, and they say, yeah, we kept you space, but the only way to get there was to climb in through this top window and sort of land a little bit like a soggy sort of a jellyfish into the middle of the session, and then out with the banjo, and you're gone, and out would come the sandwiches and pints of porter, and it was a wild, it was a brilliant time. I loved it so much. I had a mandolin that was made by a guy called Joe Foley in Dublin. Joe still makes instruments, and he was a great instrument maker. He made bazookies for the greats like Donal Lunny. I think Mick Broderick from Slide has a Foley bazooki. And I remember coming into town one day around lunchtime, and Joe had this big blue van. He had obviously come out of the pub and couldn't get into the van, and so had crawled in underneath the van and gone to sleep with his bazooki beside him. And when I came along, Joe was rolling out from under the van. And Joe was a very normal guy, but he just let loose for the week. And he was rolling out and up with the bazooki and off looking for more music, And I was, 14 or 15 playing his instrument and going, oh my God, there's Joe Foley coming out from under a van. It was so much fun, you know. So then there was a whole other side to the Willie Clancy week, which was set dancing. And it happened, so you had the town of Milltown Malway, where all the music happened. There was one pub that was for set dancing. And so you couldn't have a music session in that pub. It was only for set dancing. And very specific musicians would get to play in the pub for set dancers. And one of the most famous was an accordion player from Kerry called Johnny O'Leary. And he was renowned and revered as a musician to play for set dancing. And then out around Spanish Point, there was a number of big hotels, and their ballrooms were full of set dancers. Now, the musicians who, like me, who went to play music, thought that the set dancers were mental, like they're crazy people. They're just a world unto themselves. It's great fun, it's high energy, and hundreds of them. And they would pile into these hotels at noon and just set dance all day, drinking gallons of water. And but it was funny that the two things happened in tandem, but they were so separate. But I know lots of people who went just for the set dancing and still do and just adore it. And then I guess one of the other aspects of the Willie Clancy week were the recitals that happened in I think it was in the town hall. And to get to play in a recital was a huge deal. Now, they didn't have banjo recitals when I was going there because they didn't have banjo classes. I always thought they didn't have banjo classes in a sort of a snooty, snobbish kind of way to say that, well, it's not a real Irish instrument. And even though there was hundreds of people begging for banjo classes, they didn't have them for many years. Now, they do now, and they're really popular. And I taught it 1 year. But a room with 20 young banjo players all picking at the same time, it's very stressful trying to get them to stop. But the recitals, and again, the reverence for the music was incredible. So there would be an uilleann pipe recital, and they'd have a schedule, and you'd have to queue up for hours to get in so that you get a decent seat. My dad was a huge fan of the uilleann pipe recital. And it was like a little mafia as well. There was a concertina recital, and you'd have, you know, the greats of Irish concertina like Noel Hill and Micheál O'Reilly and so on and so forth, that would, you know, they were always going to play on the recital because they were teaching at the week, but they would pick one or two students that had excelled during the week to play on stage with them. And if my sister got picked a number of times by Noel Hill, and it was like graduation, or I don't know what. You know, everybody would know that these three musicians were picked to play at the recital, you know. Now, the recitals were too long for me because I was a teenager. I just wanted to play music, so you might kind of stick your head in and watch a little bit and then off you go. But there was people who went for the recitals, and they could go on for 3 or 4 hours. And, you know, you would have a fiddle player, and they'd all play on their own. It was very specific what they would play. And there was, again, just the respect and the absolute reverence for the music and for the musicians. It was just incredible. Travelers, visitors from all over the world, you know, lots of Japanese would come, and they would just be completely immersed in the culture, in the lessons, meeting the opportunity to be taught by some of the greats of Irish music, whether it's fiddle or accordion or, you know, whatever instrument it was. But it was just was such a vital part of my development as a musician, my love for the music. I would have learned so much. I mean, talk about 10,000 hours of practice. I mean, I probably did that in 1 or 2 weeks at Milltown, because you just played so much music. The thoughts now of playing a session that would be 9 hours long, and I regularly did those kind of sessions, and you wouldn't think about it at all. It was just magic, So great time. Our family used to go. We had a caravan. When we got older, we had a caravan and a tent, and it was just it was a great holiday. I'd get up at 6 o'clock in the morning when I was younger, and like the beach was about just like a 5-minute walk from the campsite, and up down the wild Atlantic beach really early in the morning. Not many people down there. It was just gorgeous, great for the soul. Loved it. So when we get back out into the world, if you really want, I mean, I'm trying to imagine from an American context, and or from any country that hasn't experienced something like that, the organic nature of it, the kind of just the naturalness, but the intensity, that lovely community feeling that everybody is rammed into this small town for music, for Irish music. I guess some of the bluegrass festivals have a similar kind of thing where they all go camping and they set up these big elaborate campsites, and then they have picking parties that go all night in the campsite. So it's a bit like that in a town, people camping, people staying in Airbnbs and, traveling in and out and everything. But it's love for anybody to experience it at least once. It's a magic experience. So that's the Willie Clancy Summer School, Milltown, Malbay, July. Probably won't happen this year, but you never know. 2022. Put it on your calendar.